Hello, potential listener in the future. It's the 12th of August, future of text. Absolutely boiling day here in London. Crazy boiling. I'm going to have to open some windows while I'm waiting for people. Kept them closed all day. It's kind of bizarre. So 32 degrees. Yeah, lots of fun. So I did say to the team I was going to demo Author today. Don't know if that's going to be appropriate, but we'll see. And War and Peace. Here we go. Get a few things ready. And some pause music while waiting. Can't really do that, can I? Because if it's going to be on YouTube and someone owns that music, they will say no, and all kinds of things. Hello, Mark. I think
I have seen, and I have read your preamble, but I thought I'd sort of catch up with it here. And I've got an agenda item in terms of a question that follows up from the work I was talking about last week, where it would be useful to have some input from some others here. Which is basically the reason I haven't got very far with writing it up. It's not that I'm not doing it. I'm sort of stuck on scoping it. Because there's a danger of writing a long essay about something that really collapses into something quite small. Hi, Peter.
Good morning.
So that's a question for both of you. Are you presenting at Future of Text?
I was going to ask, actually. So I was thinking, oh, are you looking for presentations?
I think we're doing really well, actually, but of course you're all very welcome to present from different perspectives, but within, hang on, I'll just do a bit of a screen share within the theme. Hi, Bob.
Hello. Hi, Bob. Hi.
This is really so weird. None of you have been watching For All Mankind on Apple TV. It's the best sci-fi drama on television. I'm saying that because Hello, Bob is a recurring joke, and it's a good reason for it, and you'll enjoy it when you see it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so as you can see here on our little spreadsheet, we have Andrea, Jaron, Lanier, Yuli, really wonderful VR people. Some people that Dini have introduced us to, who are doing interesting things, have said yes. And as you know, Annie Murphy-Paul, who wrote The Extended Mind, said yes, Sam Brooker, Bob Stein. So it's coming together well. We now have 15 presenting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good number. If we get too many, then we will do presentations both days. But so far, I'm hoping we can do presentation on the 27th and then just dialogue in groups on the next day.
Sounds good.
Sure. So in answer to your earlier question, then, I was wondering about doing something, but to be perfectly honest, and well, also for the book, if the book is not just a presentation, which is also fine. I'm very happy to try and put something in, but I mean, in the sense that seeing as you seem to have a reasonable amount, I'm actually very happy to sort of not do that, because to a certain extent, my perspective is the stuff I'm doing is making its way slowly into the journal and in the general activity here. So, you know, it would in a sense be padding.
Well, and not ignoring you, Mark, quite the opposite. Bob and Peter, did you read the, I don't know if I shared it. No, actually, no, I didn't share it with you guys. I shared it with Mark because he's an editor. I wrote a brief introduction draft for the book.
Yes.
Oh,
yes, I got that email and I wrote back to you already.
Oh, yeah, you did. You didn't like the word AI. That's right. But I
Yeah.
just want to tell you, hi, Fabian. As far as the beginning of the introduction to the book, there are some really important points I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about. And it can be distilled down to the most important thing about VR is that it's a new thing and it allows us to think what can be done, whether it's for VR and otherwise. So there will be a little bit of public imagination. And then finally, what we build for VR will benefit text in all digital forms. That's really, really important to emphasize, because a lot of the amazing things that can be done in VR will only be possible if we improve the infrastructure. And that will then be able to benefit us outside. So the work that Mark, for instance, has been doing with cleaning up the conference proceedings and stuff can make amazing things happen in VR, and you would need it for VR. But guess what? We also get the benefit in 2D, right? So when I'm then asking Bob and Peter and Mark if they want to present, it's under that kind of umbrella that it doesn't obviously have to be entirely about VR, but I would love to have a Bob Horn presentation on murals in VR, even just showing what we have so far, because I think it is astounding that something that is technically that simple, it's a rectangle you can move with a few things sticking out, cognitively is so powerful. I think that that's incredible. So please tell me, based on that, if you all want to present. I know that Fabian is presenting. I know that Randall will be presenting. So that's why I'm asking you guys now.
Yes. Yes, I'll present, and mine will be on structuring text for the for virtual reality, in virtual reality. I've had a few ideas recently, and I'm be working today on the weekend on a diagram that will begin to clarify it, and then it will be a kind of invitation to both the virtual reality people and the structuring of information people.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, Bob. Jim, do you want to present at the Future of Text, being the new guy here? Oh, you're muted, I'm afraid.
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now.
Good. I didn't hear the question for
the Future of Text Symposium, would you like to present?
Let me think about it. When is the symposium?
27th and 28th of September. But the thing is, if you'd like to, and if you have something you feel is relevant, that would be great. However, if you also want to be a model citizen attendee, that would also be very useful for us, because I will ask everybody to send in an abstract, presenter and non-presenter, where the non-presenters will be asked to submit a sentence, a paragraph, whatever, about what they think they will get out of these 2 days, or what they think this is. It'll help stimulate all our thinking. So even that would be very valuable for you to, as a quite involved member, to choose to do.
I would lean toward the latter rather than the former. Let me think about the answer, though. I feel strongly about the formatting of text and how 99% of the books out there are making an enormous mistake. But I'm not sure that other people agree with that. I think Bob probably does. But it seemed to me that books, editors and authors need to think about books from a reader's point of view, because it takes me 3 or 4 times as long, if not 10 times as long, to read a book as it should, if I were able to do what Bob describes as skip or scan, skip, and read selectively. I think formatting of text and the structuring of text, especially when one has numerical points that are visually evident as numerical points, can save an enormous amount of time and dramatically increase a reader's retention of the major ideas that an author is trying to convey.
Yeah.
Yet books do not do that.
If you were to write that down, what you said now, and have that as your abstract, you can then later decide whether it's for a presentation, because a presentation that's just angry and saying something isn't done is just as valuable as something offering a solution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the solution is a question that at some point in time, I probably want to talk to you about, especially in the context of the frustration you expressed last, was it Monday?
It was a dark
about
Monday a week ago, indeed.
I was in Chicago at the time, so listening somewhat removed at a distance. But I felt that, and I had an experience some 30 years ago where I basically gave up some work that I believed deeply in out of financial necessity to just generate consulting revenue. And I wanted you to be aware of that, because it seems to me that you may be on the verge of making a similar mistake. I conveyed, I think, the color graphics that I had developed 30 years ago. And I think I still see nothing that's as relevant as those graphics, although I've not been looking. And so you and I may want to have a conversation.
Yeah, I look
Sometime
forward
future.
to that. Plus this community. Now,
Froda, on the group of people on your spreadsheet for the conference, I don't see category. Maybe I missed it. That
I have
with structuring of information. And I'm thinking particularly of what's people who haven't been in our group for a while, David LeBeau and a Brazilian guy, I forgot his name.
Raphael,
yes. They would be, what they're doing is very relevant to the structuring of information and the thinking about it. But I think they haven't, I haven't been in touch with them, so I don't know what's been happening with them, but I don't know whether you have or not, but they would be relevant.
Yeah, they would be relevant, but this future of text is really focused on VR and AI.
But it's what you do. It's what you do in VR and AI that's important. It's not just general VR and AR.
Oh, no, of course it is, Bob. But they have presented and been part of earlier symposium and books. So it's a matter of it's very. some of it, like what you're doing, because it relates to the mural, obviously, I think is seriously relevant, but we have to, look at the focus on this. By the way, this is funny, Jim. I just want to show you guys a brief TikTok, because I think this addresses what you said.
Right. This is one of my favorite sentences of all time. Let me tell you why. Every time you say it, if you emphasize a different word, it changes the meaning of the sentence. I didn't say we should kill him. I didn't say we should kill him. I didn't say we should kill him. I didn't say we should kill him.
And it goes on and on, but I think it's so great because, limits of text are important for us to consider too. The way you choose to emphasize, whether it's with typography or layout or whatever, is pretty crucial.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Peter, will you want to present, do you think? Peter, what do you think you will want to present?
Well, given my penchant for diving in way too deep into the weeds, I think I can force myself to do, say, 5 to 10 minutes with some slides of key points at a high level and avoid dipping into any attempts to start a demo going that would wind up running off track.
Okay, excellent.
Say a 5 to 10 minute block.
Yes, that's, well, everybody gets 20 minutes, which is supposed to be 10-minute dialogue and 10-minute presentation, but a shorter presentation is always welcomed.
Okay, so in that time frame, that'll work.
Yeah.
And I'll get something together with nice slides and not dive in too deep or running off the rails, as again, I have that tendency to do. It should work out very nicely. One thing I want to do is to draw a couple of those points. Remember how I keep mentioning the Cyberspace First Steps book? I like to maybe pull out a couple ideas there, turn them into slides for people who don't have the time to go in and sift through those chapters, because that really ties the VR possibilities in to general information spaces and how we think about things. So that's sort of the direction I'm thinking for the presentation.
Yeah, no, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. Anybody have any questions for this spreadsheet? Who's on here? You all have direct access to it. You don't just have to see my screen, right?
I'm not sure how I get direct access. I assume it's quite simple.
I'll give you a link right now if it lets me. Yeah, there I could click on the buttons. Okay, it's now in the chat.
Great, thank you very much.
Very good.
Yeah, so Jim Holland, he said yes quite quickly, which is lovely. Waiting for these other people. There's obviously these categories are not exactly brilliant. It does kind of vary what different people are. So, Mark, sorry, you were off screen. I didn't see your hand.
It's all right. Well, it was really just an observation raised by actually what sort of Jim mentioned, and this thing of editing, and just the sort of thought, I don't know if we have any sort of editors in our place context, because and I assume at this point we're not talking about writing the world's next War and Peace, but more about broadly technical or informative writing. But I just wonder the degree to which editors actually see that as part of their role, or indeed have the technical competence to do what's being implied. And if that sounds like a tart compliment about editors, I don't mean that way at all. I just genuinely think that, the interesting thing is, are we beginning to suggest something that actually somewhat extends and radically shifts the boundaries of what is currently has a different boundary, to wit, that of being an editor? Because I would imagine that quite a lot of editors don't see that as their role. It's a sort of somebody else, man in a brown coat, sort of IT type thing, rather than an understanding that you need to do something. And one other observation on that is that, of course, when we talk about formatting, in reality, we're talking about structure. Formatting is visual and puts us back in the print age. In order to do it, not just in print, but in VR and all these other places, what we're actually talking about is the structure that informs you to say that when you see this text in this context, it needs to appear like that. If you just treat it if we start from the visual, we'll completely miss the rather important infrastructure that needs to go underneath it, which is one of the things that's biting us at the moment in some of our tools.
I half agree with you. I think that visual is structural, but of course the argument against that sentence is Microsoft Word, where you can use styles, but usually it's a big mishmash and people make a heading for making it bold and big and colored and whatever, which has no structural knowledge whatsoever. That is an interesting point. Talking of War and Peace, yes, Mark?
Yeah, and this isn't sort of, I'm trying to avoid, because this isn't meant by way of some argumentation, but I think with talking slightly adults, I totally get you, and I'm not suggesting that you can't or shouldn't be able to use some sort of visual sort of WYSIWYG type tool in a VR space. What I'm getting at is, say take the book that Bob wrote, the blue one, Mapping Hypertext, back before we had the affordance of even thinking about doing something like that in, say, an ebook. I think that you would approach that differently now. It's not that you necessarily might have different stylings in the printed version of the book, but I suspect the way in which you would set up the book, that you would structure it, so you would disconnect or you would connect the visualization or the styling with the text in a different way.
Yeah.
So it would be much closer to web markup than it would be to doing it, something that you would do in Quark or InDesign. And
right.
that's a significant difference. And that gets to my point about whether editors really have an understanding of that degree of technical.
I don't think that's an editor thing, it's an author thing, because just like where you choose to put the comma in a sentence to, slow things down and so on, there are of course rules, but also emphasis. Bold, an author called bold emphasize on page, and italic emphasize in sentence, because that's basically what it does when it is not just used by itself. So I do think that bold and italic and bold italic does carry semantic meaning for the author. It is a way of emphasizing a part of a sentence. But anyway, if it's okay, I suggested earlier in the week.
That's all when you're not doing visual language.
Well, I mean,
that's all when you're doing straight old scroll like thinking and scroll like writing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about primarily textual documents. If you have a document with illustrations, graphs, images, pictures, and so on, of course, you have a greater reliance on that layouts.
Yeah.
But I asked earlier this week if it was okay if I did a 20-minute walkthrough of author and reader. I didn't get any strong no's. So is that okay if we go through that now? We've just had a slight upgrade, and I would think it'd be really great if you guys were up to speed.
Well, of course, some of us may not have been at whatever you asked. I wasn't, probably. So could you ask again?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Anyway.
Oh, okay. What is the ask?
They ask if I can spend 20 minutes to go through the latest update of author and reader. So you guys have an idea of what practically we're trying to do on this side.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Very good.
I'd like to see it.
Thank you, Fabian. Are you okay? Fabian, have you had a haircut? Maybe it's just more lighting. You look a bit cleaner somehow. And I mean that nicely, not in a jokey way.
Because at the moment we're watching an Italian TV show, so then I do a different airbrush. But I appreciate.
Well, of course, that makes a lot of sense. Yes, right. Okay, so War and Peace is I'm showing it here in Apple's preview. So it's 1,375 pages. So I've opened it in Reader as well. Reader is my PDF reader program. The point of developing Reader is that when you export from author, you can of course export with visual meta, but nothing understands visual meta yet. That's why Reader has been developed. But I just wanted to show you this. So you're reading and you come across, you've been reading and reading forever, and you come across Prince Hippolyte. So you do Command F, select Prince Hippolyte and do Command F. And now it goes through the whole document and highlights and finds all the, sorry, the kids are swimming outside, it's a bit screamy at times. It finds all the occurrences of it, because PDF is line-based, not sentence-based. It shows in normal black the sentence, and then it shows above and below 2 grayed out lines for context. The point of that is that, I mean, just reading something, you may, okay, you know, Prince Vasily, I press Command F, and here I have greeted Prince Vasily Karagian, a man of high rank and importance. So then you've been reminded who that person is. So the point of that was, in a normal fast computer, to do War and Peace, you saw it instantly just happened, right? So let's launch Author. So when we open Author, we get this open dialog, and that's a new feature. The reason for this is actually bizarre and worth highlighting. I had before, you open it and then you had to do Command O or go new or open like this, like we're all used to. But I've had user email saying, this is the worst piece of software ever. I launch it and there's no information about what I can do. So a lot of younger people are not even used to that. They have to have a screen they can click on, which is just the reality. I'm going to move the zoom control and we're going to go to the help, the user guide. And I'm going to click bottom right, so unlock it. So what we're going to do now is go through using Author. It's kind of annoying because when I go full screen, I lose you guys. To go through how it works. And I thought the quickest way to not waste your time would basically to go through the user guide and show you the actions of this. So Author is very keyboard shortcut based. It's a very clean environment. There's hardly anything there. And because I'm going to go full screen and I'll lose you, please interrupt me at any time. Don't put up any hands because I can't see them, okay? Right.
Got it.
Thanks. So the first thing that I'm really happy with is I press the escape key to go in and out of full screen. That means that I can be in full relaxed mode instantly without having to fiddle with Fitz Law and all that stuff, right?
On phone.
Okay.
Oh, that was someone else. Cool. Also, the keyboard shortcuts, if you control click on something, you could see them. And you'll notice the basic cut is listed on here, of course, too. And it has the icon, the command icon, and X. So all of these commands, as long as you remember to control click, they are accessible. And for some reason, on most Mac software, it doesn't show you the shortcuts and the menus, but here they are. So for instance, and this goes to Mark's point, when it comes to structure, if you want to make a heading, you do Command 1 for top level heading, Command 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever level you want, do it with a keyboard shortcut, or do it by control clicking. I'm just going to come up.
That's useful because it also makes the shortcuts more discoverable.
Yeah, there is a real kind of push and pull about having an empty screen. I got an email from a user this week who is calling himself neurodivergent. I don't know in what sense, but said that it's so important for him to have a clean screen with all kinds of buttons. But then it's easy to forget what things are, so that's why we have to have that. So doing this, so we have. So we do the form. I was actually going to use this. Hang on, where's the audio? Is that Jim or Peter? I'm going to mute you guys. Yeah, I was planning on using this anyway. Okay, so one of the benefits of having this structure is that the system knows this is a heading, it knows this is a heading, it knows this is a heading. So if I now do Command minus on my keyboard for fold, it folds the document into an outline. I can keep pressing that to fold only to top level. And then I can jump around the document anytime I want. One of the new things this week is if I go far down the document and fold, it shows me the top level heading here is the top level that was in the page. So you see now it has journal at the top. Journal is, yeah, right there towards the top. It's not exactly right, and it doesn't need to be. The point is that before that happened, wherever you were in the document, it would always fall to the top, which we didn't think about. It's one of those things that you have to use to really feel. So when I was working on my thesis, which is quite large, I'll show you what I mean. So here I am going through 70,000 words almost. Hang on, just scrolling down. And now I fold the document, right? If it was now at the top, if I was dealing with jumping between two sections here, it would actually be complete hell. Was that a question or comment?
Frode?
Yeah.
I just got a thought. I was looking at the bottom and how it has the word count. Do you think we could also have a definition / concept count at the bottom? I think that'd be really useful.
We'd have something similar. We have defined concepts here. So we don't have the number, but we do have them.
Yeah, I was thinking of a count at the bottom would be very nice, because as I'm building a document, I'd like to be able to see that sense. Also, when you're in the folded mode, it would be nice if it could indicate within the visible region on the screen how many concepts are defined. So as you're sort of like scrolling through in a folded mode, you're basically looking at a subset of the document. It'd be nice to have that kind of live feedback as to the concepts, then be able to hook into them.
Well,
So
okay.
instead of having the full list of all defined concepts, it would be, you'd get a concept count on the bottom, and clicking it could give you give you the list of concepts that are within that currently folded visible region of the screen.
Well, you can do this. Command-Shift-D shows you the headings plus whatever concepts are in that section.
Okay, that's good.
So it is definitely thinking along the same kind of way. We also have Command-Shift-N to show you any names. So, you know, Adrian Frutiger, you know, and so on.
That's better than a count.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, thanks. So in here, we have same kind of Command F. I'm gonna have to tell these kids stop running in a minute. As you saw in the here, however, of course, it's proper text, so it's better than in PDF. But I just want to see a large document. So what I use this for often is whatever terminology, like, or phrasing, have I used it before in my document? Select it, Command F, see if it appears somewhere else. Command F again, and I'm out of that view. One of the principles here is it should be really, really quick and easy to get into a view, but equally quick to go out. And something that I've learned from the computer game over the last month is if I have a lot of controls, that's fine. But if the controls have to be accessed in different ways, I will forget them. So that's why going into a mode and out of the mode is the same key. It's not escape, it's not command minus, it's not cancel. It's the same thing to go into a find and out of a find, for instance. So defined concepts is something I'm very excited about, and we talked about for a bit. The way it works here is it's supposed to engage the user's brain. It's not supposed to take work away from the user. So there's no automatic anything. So I select, for instance, the word author, oops, excuse me, and do Command D or command for define concept. I try to make the keyboard shortcuts obvious. Find, Command F, define, Command D. So here I've written earlier a beginning of a word processor from the augmented text company exports to PDF, exports with visual meta. You'll notice that some of these words are bold. If I click on them, it loads them. So that means I can interact with this already. See what happens now. Boom. It immediately became a link because it knows that visual meta has been defined on this page, right? So I click on visual meta now, and here we go. We can also, if there are references in the document, I can insert them to be associated with this particular defined concept, but this is way underdeveloped at the moment. So I click save, and I'm going to go full screen again now. Just want to make sure I haven't missed anything obvious here. Yeah, the way that you can, the way that you can keep clicking in here is really an important innovation because you have a different knowledge space. But if you look at, click at the bottom where it says right/map or do Command M, here are all the defined concepts in this document randomly laid out. We don't have the cleverness to do anything else yet. But if you click on one, it shows what it has. So let's move this down a little bit. So, okay, so in case of author, author refers to visual meta, and you saw the sentence exports with visual meta. PDF exports to PDF. But then you see here, the one from the word liquid is light gray. That is because author does not refer to liquid, but liquid refers to author. And now you can see how that works. So black is what it contains, and gray is what links into it.
So these are inbound and outbound links, essentially.
Exactly right. And they can be modified at all times here. The links are based on nothing more clever. Hang on, I'm just going to ask these guys. Yeah, hey, guys. Recording with the guys. Not too. You make sure there's not too much screaming. Sorry, everyone. 32 degrees in London, so people are going mad.
Honestly, we just hear you. It's fine. There is no noise.
Oh, okay, good. All right, that's good. Then I won't scream at them again. Any questions on this?
Yes, every time you click on one of those lines, one of those connections, you don't leave it on long enough for me to read it. So I don't know what those words are saying or where they come from.
Okay, so I will do it slowly. Thank you, Bob, for your concern. So I've now selected Visual Meta. And if I click Command D, you can see Visual Meta includes the term PDF and Augmented Text Company. So you can now see in this view that if I point to the dark line going to PDF, the sentence that is in the definition of Visual Meta appears. If I point to the line going to the Augmented Text Company, same thing. It happens to be the same sentence because it has both of those terms in it.
And it comes from that I see where it comes from now. Okay.
Yeah. So I can, just for fun, I can do something like this. Not liquid. And now you can see a really simple one.
Is there a way to save that map view with the sentence highlighted like that out to a PDF file automatically? Or do we have to do the traditional screen grab and then cut and play with Mac tools?
This part of it is very badly done at this point. It's very, very crude, partly because I can't afford more, partly because I want the user to do the manual heavy lifting. So I would like to do that kind of thing, to have maybe a bar at the top of the screen saving different views, for instance.
Right.
So yeah, we're thinking about that.
Because I want to be able to drop a view like that into a journal article I'm writing.
Yeah, other than if you do it straight up. So what I'd like to do now, skipping ahead and coming back, is to export the document. I'm going to do all these fancy things. Boom. Because I know we've discussed it, but to actually show you. So here I've exported that user guide. It automatically made a table of contents. But if I now select something in here, now I'm in Reader. This is a normal PDF that has Visual Meta. So I select, hang on, I can zoom in a little bit. If I select the word author and do Command F for find, it does the find, but at the top of the screen, there is the definition you saw in author, which you can click through on.
Oh, one thing, right, and I don't think there's an easy way around. One thing I discovered.
Mark, just to wrap this bit, just 10 more seconds.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The reason for this is, and to show you now, is that at the end of the documents, there is the glossary, very basic, formatted like this. So that with Visual Meta makes the document know what the words are that are defined context, concept, sorry. Yes, Mark?
Sorry, it was a quick one. It's just a reference to fine, but something I knew I meant to report and probably didn't. And I don't think there's an easy way around this. One thing that mentioning this, it works best if you use short sentences. When I was working in author on some transcripts of our talks, I was trying to find things, and basically I was getting back paragraphs that extended most of the page that I was on. And when I tried to scroll to the word that was highlighted, it took me back out. As I say, that's not it's not, I don't say that as a negative, it's just an observation, and I don't know yet quite what the solution to that is, except use short sentences.
Yeah, also for that, because I'm going to try to do something with this video. If you send that as a bug report, I would appreciate that.
Okay, we'll do.
Yeah. But so you can see, guys, the export includes the glossary, which is all the defined concepts. It also has all the endnotes and references. The endnotes are kind of fun. That's something that actually Mark made me do. It's related to the links. Let me just there we go, endnotes, right? So you see it's really small. No, it doesn't actually work on that. Well, ignore that then. All right, moving swiftly on. Anybody have any comments or questions with the map and the defined concepts?
So just to make the point, the endnotes here, in a sense, is a coverall for footnotes, because clearly footnotes in the formal sense of page notes aren't going to work here because the page isn't particularly defined. But endnotes at least covers for people who need to make in-text annotations. I think it gives an acceptable degree of coverage to that sort of functionality. Quite where it ends up is also moot, but the joy I get from watching this is to see the structure, which goes back to this point that what it looks like on screen is almost neither here nor there, because it's coming out of a structure that's underneath. So all these bits you're showing me are there. Most of them do or will go through into Visual Meta. So it doesn't really matter what font we use or what, bolding. I mean, because we know the intent is captured in the metadata underneath. So whatever we're using now, if someone wants to do it differently because they need, they have trouble reading or something, they need it on a different screen setup or something, it's built in here without it being, and without that string being sort of aggressively in your face. So I like that.
Yeah, the thing about endnotes also is that when you export your PDF, the links sometimes don't stay active. So that's what and also sometimes you don't want a full citation. So what I do then is just make an endnote with the link. So when you're reading the document, you have that little top thing and you click and it's visually clean. We also have something called magic margins, where when you are full screen, you can double click on the side and write anything you like. And these margins are actually the same as the map logically. Sorry, I'm going all over the place. So I'm writing a note to myself. This is what I used it for doing my thesis, was to write my research questions on the margin. So as I was working, the margins don't move. And then if I needed to refer to the language, I just clicked on the margin and then I could deal with it and go on.
Just to confirm, what we're seeing is when you click into the main body, the body copy, the margins disappear. When you click into the margin, you see the margin. So they're always there. They're just not visible when you're working in the main text, which makes sense.
Yeah, it used to be you would mouse over them, but that was too annoying. So now it's only click, but they don't appear when you are not in full screen, because generally there just isn't enough space. And I know it sounds like a detail, but under Command, comma, for preferences, we now have this. So if you need to work in a thin column, you can do that. When I tend to be relatively narrow when I'm writing. And then when I'm editing, I go extremely wide because it's a different view. So even though it seems very prosaic, it's the kind of view stuff that we've been talking about. Highlighting is a bit different here. The way it is used for doing big documents is you go through what you think is important for a bit, and then you do Command Shift H, and it highlights it in white. And that means that, yeah, some of it might be bold, but you really capture what the different bits do. Because when you now do Command minus to fold, anything that is highlighted shows up as well. So when I was working on the massive thesis, everything that I felt I needed to remind myself of as the flow of the document was there. And it, by the way, we're done, made some small changes I just want to have a look at. It meant that I could do that kind of markup because it doesn't get transferred into the document when it's exported because it's white on white. So it doesn't have any issues with that. Any questions?
I've got an observation. So I remember when I was helping you, thinking through on this, and one of the things was that it was a way of having, in a sense, a highlight that wasn't the highlight as we think of it, you know, in some glowing neon color or something, in the way that people highlight. So this was using a highlight or creating a text anchor whose purpose was not in the normal highlighting run of things. This is specifically a note to self, and with the extra affordance of it appearing in the fold. I think it's quite nice. And again, one of the things we discussed at some length was doing it in a way that's subtle enough so that it didn't act like a highlight. You don't want this, by and large, to pull your eye. You know why you've highlighted it, so that you have this affordance of collapsing onto it. You don't want it catching your eye every time you scroll past it, whereas you might if you'd done a normal highlight in yellow or red or whatever, which had a different semantic meaning to you. Yeah, a normal tends to be very strong. And also you see here in the dark view, which automatically happens if the Mac goes dark view, it's a grayish background because when we did black, which would be the reverse, it rendered horribly. But please also note, this goes to our previous discussion of type versus structure and so on. You see the text not visible here. That's bold, and bold normally in a dark view isn't bold. So what I had to do is to make all the other text slightly gray and leave it white so it would be seen. Otherwise, the bolding doesn't have any meaning. It's just too weak. Right, so moving through, we're about halfway. To help with longer documents, one thing we added is Command click on a heading, and you get this heading notes. This is supposed to be, if you get an idea what you want to change here, maybe you're a student and your advisor tells you what to do, you add that. When you're working in normal view, you don't see anything. But when you do the fold, you can see here, it gives a little asterisk. That's all it does. So it's just another way for you to stick stickies on meta information for yourself that isn't obtrusive when you're writing. I'm a very visual guy, so I really cannot stand clutter. Also, by the way, if you do Command click, you can go show options here, and here you can add the level of heading, just like you did before. And you can also add a contributing author. So that means that when this document is exported to PDF with visual meta, in this case, everything here until there's a new contributing author will be listed as having been written by Fabian. Views, we've already looked. Just a quick thought on that. Of course, you probably there's an edge there that it needs to be bounded at some point, because the contributing author or author cited there may just cease to be nothing. rather than another person. Because not everything you're writing in the document may necessarily have, you know, another contributor. But I say it's an edge case, but just something to bear in mind.
I will be the author of this document. So whoever is the owner, so to speak, of the document will be assigned to all the other ones. So that you could also have only author of the document, but editor also, which is a bit niche, but that's how we do our journal. So with the views, we have, as you saw, Command-Shift-D, that shows all the defined text. This also works in Reader with a document that has been exported with Visual Meta. Can do the names, as you saw. For some reason, it has click as a name here. No idea how that works. That's a mistake. And then this one, which is completely different, Command-Shift-B, and it fades everything that isn't bold. So if you choose to have bold as being important for the way you're writing, this is a really strong way to get that out. These are Doug Engelbart inspired, not that he would do anything this silly, but inspired views just to go further and further. And then we have citing, which is a very important thing that we can get to. So let's say I want to insert a citation here. I do Command-T, because Command-C is, of course, copy. And I'm going to do the extended mine, and I see Annie Murphy Paul is on top. I just hit enter. And now I have all the citation information I need for that book. When this is exported, you can see here it has a little 1. And this is thanks to you, Mark. You requested this. Because of the Visual Meta and because of the reference formatting, I can click on this 1 in hard brackets and it gives me all the information about the book. Can even click on this link to have access to the book in Google Books. Hi, Brandel.
I just throw in the reason for bringing it up really was this constant horror. If you're reading any academic journal, whether it's using numbered citations or whether it's using, you know, a name and date, is the reality. It says blogs 2004. Do I know if I read that or not? The reality, unless you really were at the center of a field, you probably don't. So just having something that gives you enough information, say, okay, I know what this is, I can read on, or I need to go off on a side quest and, you know, fill in the gaps here before I move on. And that's really what that suggestion was doing. Peter's got his hand up.
Oh yeah, Peter, I can't see the hand very much, so please just cut in.
Okay, as I'm watching this, I'm thinking to myself that it would be a dream interface for building webs and programming if there was a way to have a concept of multiple files inside of a single document, so that when you export, instead of it being exported from author to a single file, it would be exported to a set of files. So you'd have basically a special heading designated as being a file heading that would cause a file to appear at a location on your hard drive. Then you could have a single author document for an entire programming project. And when you went out to save it, it would create the 10 or 12 or whatever file in whatever folder structure was necessary, but you'd be able to be using the single author environment to access all of that code, jump around in it, and work. I think that'd be just a huge win for the literate programming world, because up until now, no one's come up with a decent user interface for writing a literate web.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. That's a bit rich to digest now, but if you wouldn't mind putting it in an email, I'd be happy to look at that.
Just to connect the two ends, if I'm understanding Peter right, so an analogy might be that when you publish your thesis document, for instance, that each chapter might fall out just for sake of argument, but in terms of this concept of their big separate files, so that if I understand Peter incorrectly, if I'm wrong, that in essence by some way that you would have to indicate so the application knew that instead of basically, you know, one file, you say, for sake of argument, and if you have 10 chapters, you get 10 one-chapter documents.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Yes, and that could work also for doing export to be typesetting in LaTeX, or to creating code or even if you just simply want to be having a data set as a separate file to accompany your main piece, but to have the data set and the document all in a single author file for editing purposes, but to have the result be, here's the final output file, plus here's the data set file as a clean, distinct, separate file.
Well, I mean, the goal of Visual Meta is to have all of that in Visual Meta. But as Brendel found out when he looked at the author document .liquid, there are JSON files in there that are more usable. So this is a longer type discussion that I think we absolutely need to have. Okay, so we've looked at citing from books. This is how you can cite from an academic document. If there's a DOI, you take that DOI and you paste it. And it goes online, resolves the DOI into whatever's available to turn that into citation. You're supposed to say wow or something for that one. That is the reason Visual Meta exists.
Ooh, super
Because
sexy feature.
The feature of it is parsing on pasting. That's really what it is. It goes and does something with that data. So let's just take a copy here from Safari, written by some Joe guy. This is from the web, and when I'll change that, sorry. Command T, use Safari copy. And it goes and at least gets the basics. It can't find the name. I can't remember the last name, but at least it has the original text, the web address, the date, whatever is available. To cite,
I think. Sorry,
Yeah.
Fred. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just think, I mean, the easy canard point to say at this point is, well, it hasn't got all the information. But I mean, the thing I think that's good about this is it's hard enough getting students to cite anything at all. The fact that at this point, what you get automatically may be incomplete is true, but you can correct it because there are boxes, as it were, that you can go in and correct. But you've got something, you've created the citation, you started down that journey.
Yeah,
And so, for instance,
exactly.
in a pedagogic context, your teacher could say, "Okay, that's fine, but your reference information is incomplete." But then they can go fix that. So I think this is nice.
Yeah, Fabian said it really well on Twitter this week when talking about something related. He said, it's a bicycle for your mind, but you still need to know how to pedal. So it'll help you part of the way, but you still have the responsibility. And then finally, with citations, if you add an image, like I took a screenshot here, you click on that image. So I took this image, so I just click authors, so it knows my name. I give it a name, and there it is, puts it in. So that'll also now be in reference section when you export. And sorry guys for the earlier bit that for those of you who came in after a bit, must be a bit boring. But anyway, if you select text and do Command K, the normal web link, it just adds it. You don't have any dialogue, which I think is nice and elegant. However, when we export to PDF, it's not reliable. That link will be active. So unfortunately, in most of the cases, we have to write it out anyway. To add an internal link, this is really nice. Command Shift K. You can choose a heading, and it adds the link. Nothing changes except for the font becomes the same as the heading font to give you small indication. So when you export that now becomes a link to jump in the document. In the big thesis document I wrote, I have a ton of those. It makes it much easier. And of course, that's a standard PDF feature to have internal links. It's just very useful to have them. Endnotes we've done, but anyway, the journal, which was invented during the Hypertext conference, sitting there listening to presentations, was lots of things. And few people, including Mark, said it may be a bit too feature-rich, as in a bit too confusing. So the journal now is, do you want to see every single thing? It is just Command J for journal. I do Command J, it opens my journal. That's it. There are no other things about the journal that are different from a normal author document. If I do Command minus, fold it, jump around, do the highlights, Everything is, this is, you know, what we're talking about with time coding, which hopefully we can talk about some more today if I can finish quickly. All of this is here. We have the end notes with the links, all of that stuff. So the idea of the journal is there are many kind of note-taking systems. Some are very, very rigorous, where you take a note in a box and you have to specify how things relate. That's very fashionable and it's very good. Then at other times you want to have basically a paper notepad in front of you and just write stuff in a meeting. The idea here is that I'm going to use this for a while, testing it myself, and then after 6 months or something, just see, is it useful? Can I find stuff? Like I have Brandel. This is every reference to Brandel in the document. Is that enough or not? I don't know. We'll see. Cuttings is quite fun. If I normally cut something and then I cut something else, I will have lost the first cutting, right? But here I have Control V, and here is everything that I just cut. Nothing is thrown away. If I copy
So
something,
when does that purge? At the end of the session or when the document closes?
never. I think it's become an issue with my PhD paper because it's so overmassive. I have to go in and deal with it. But the idea is that as you're working on a document, you're going to go through lots of changes. And, you know, we already have this. Hang on, this is revert to browse all versions. What do we got? Oh, we have Time Machine built in. So this document was made today, so there haven't been many saves. But every time you do a closing of the document or you do a manual Command S, it will make a new version. So you have that. And if you have that plus the cuttings, then you have quite a rich archaeology to go through to find things later on. Because one of the problems with digital text, of course, is you don't have the scratched out bits that we had in the olden days. So, yeah, so we have.
Are you on a roll, or can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, feel free. I'm almost done, so good timing anyway.
Okay. So there are lots and lots of really neat keystrokes to do lots of stuff. Are there buttons to do those things?
Okay. So that's a very important and big question. Yes and no. As I said earlier in the beginning of this, learning many keystrokes, even for me who designed the software, can be confusing in use. So for instance, I was going to do a defined concept earlier and I did Command F instead of Command D. My fingers hit the wrong thing. So too many keyboard shortcuts are not necessarily good, first of all. So that is why we have the same keyboard shortcut to go in and out of something. So if I do a find with Command F, I do Command F to go out of it as well. It's small answer to your question. The second one is, as it says at the very top of the user guide, it says right here, if you control click, that is really most of the commands available. So the user needs to remember that. And then the commands are actually written on the side to help you learn them. So this is a real balance, because at the bottom of the screen, I have word count. Then there is the toggle right map, because it's such a big thing. And right now we have focus mode here. I'm not sure why. We had something else there before, but I don't want to have too much because it really puts another load on the user. This thing is, I can't for some reason demo now that we're on a Zoom call, because it's just normal Apple speech to text, which is actually very good. It's one of those things we just get for free. So if you click the globe key and the D, then you can just start writing. It's something that we didn't even bother mention before, but it's amazing it's there.
Does that work offline? Does that work offline?
I'm not sure if it works offline, but it works fast. So at least it feels like it is offline. Yeah, export, you've seen, most of you guys, we have many options, HTML and all that, but the key one for us is, of course, PDF. And you have a ton of options here. To put it into Visual Meta. And one of them nice ones is you can mark it as a book, so it shows the first page like this when you're in full screen. So you get the table of contents. You can hop around and you can look at your citations. Here you see the citation we did based on a DOI. This is the one we did based on a book. And so on. Oh, and there's these guys. And at the end, we have the references and normal thing.
A quick one on Keynotes. I put in a sort of example in the sidebar that something I found, and against my expectation, but mainly because when I did it, people stopped complaining for a resource I write. It was a reverse lookup, which starts with the key that you press, followed by the modifiers, because often, you know, you may find that F is fine, but things modify F are also find related. In fact, most apps don't manage to follow that, because eventually, you know, you run out of letters or extensions to the letter. But nonetheless, what I did find was that, funnily enough, a reverse lookup page seems to get the least complaints as a start page for I don't know what the shortcut. I know there's a shortcut, but I don't know what it is for the thing I want to do. So I just throw that in as a suggestion.
Yeah, no, there are several things I plan to, and today I plan to record this conversation with you, and every section would have a YouTube link to that section and the discussion, but it's been a bit messy. So I'll just find someone neutral to do something similar. That is another way of trying to help people get access to learn these things. But yes, having just a list of commands is useful. But in closing, so you've seen the author-reader relationship, where reader is the one software that parses Visual Meta now. So there's also another one called Liquid. Liquid was developed many, many years ago, and it's super simple. You can even launch it with a control click here, but I have it set up for command space. You can set it up for whatever. All it gives you is whatever text in this little bar. And then you have options. And you can see in brackets, S is search, R is references. Those are the keyboard shortcuts. So let's say I want to look up Liquid in Wikipedia. That would be RW. But in reality, it's much faster than that, because I just do this. And this is completely stolen from Doug Engelbart's work, because in NLS, when you type a command or type a command sequence and you forget what the next command can be, you hit question mark and it shows you all the possible commands. And that's what this is in reverse. Right? So the person learning to get used to it uses this. But after a while, it's just so quick. So I find it really annoying when I have to work on a machine where this isn't available. No, that's us. And another, I think this is the very last thing. When you come across something and you want to read, and it's just because it's on the web, it's a bit messy. And that's not what I meant to do. You can do this. So it takes that text, gives it a gray background, and it does a break on command or and or those kinds of words. And on period, it does a double break. That's all it does.
Neat.
Thank you. Any final questions? Well, actually, just for Alan and Brandel, just really quickly. It's, you know, you assign a heading by doing command 1, 2, 3 for the different levels. That means you can then fold the document. If you highlight something, which you might want to do to really show yourself what the key parts of a paragraph is, because you may need all of this other things for fluff, because you know the reader wants it. When you fold it, whatever is highlighted also appears, which is pretty important for that. And this is so stupid, but this just to admit to you guys, the last thing from this upgrade is that when you fold, the folded view shows you where you are. It doesn't show from the top. And when you're dealing with a huge document, that's an absolutely phenomenally huge thing. When I was working on my thesis and I was working on expert interviews and it kept showing me the top, that was a torture. Yeah, so thank you very much for going through this. I found it very refreshing to have this discussion, so thank you.
Jim,
That's
you're
cool.
muted.
Jim, are you there? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I just unmuted. I found it very insightful. So thank you for the very short summary. I look forward to exploring it extensively. I find the multi-level headings, or subheadings, an enormously powerful capabilities. So I look forward to playing with it. And that automatically kind of says that this could be a very useful and very quick note-taking capability. You know, I've been taking handwritten notes of these meetings and they're very disorganized, in part because I write slowly. This could be a very useful tool for that. So I look forward to exploring it a great deal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I uploaded to everyone here the brief introduction to the symposium. Actually, I'll share this because it's really important that we are on this, literally on the same page of this. It relates a bit to what you said as well. So the thing, with all due respect, Brandel, the big thing about VR is, of course, VR itself, because in VR, the text has literally been freed from the rectangular page. But it's also really, really important that it helps people rethink what text can be. So we got to really use that kind of imagination. But the sales point that I'm using for Bint and other people is that all this amazing stuff we want to do in VR cannot be done with the text as it is unstructured now. We're going to need better infrastructures for it. So in other words, what we build for VR will benefit text in all digital forms.
I think that's a reasonable way of framing it. My wife and I were watching John Oliver's last night, and something that we were thinking about is the fact that, I don't know if people watch that, but it's interesting and moderately funny. But one of the things that's very much lacking is the description of the provenance of a lot of the research, and it's actually somewhat aberrant in a modern context, because now a lot of people are putting useful but sort of staunch advocacy comedy videos up on the internet, and their descriptions and their citations and their bibliographies are actually pretty well furnished. And so arguably, I would say Last Week Tonight was one of the origins, one of the inspirations for many, if not most, of those people doing those things. But it's now behind in terms of the relationships that it depicts and one's ability to see that as a starting point for a navigation of a network of information about those pieces of, about those points of view. So I think, in just a properly connected environment, let alone a virtual reality or a spatial one, it's an essential component, and people do better or worse. But yeah, I definitely agree that in order to make real use of text, and in particular, once we have the ability to devote more space to it, then we'll actually be quite explicitly looking, and by we I mean everyone, for things that we can do to navigate in that space, with that space rather, through into things that are beneficial for our understanding of the media that we're consuming.
I'm glad you mentioned. I did wonder what you meant by boxes in the document. So I'm glad I understand now. I assume you meant text boxes or something. So I wonder if that phrase has quite the salience that you are intending there.
Yeah, good question.
No, just like idea. I'm just wondering if it comes across.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really amazing opportunities we have now is this thing that I just highlighted here. And this, Brendel and Alan, earlier in the discussion today, it was little things like, should text be laid out, or is, all that normal stuff we talk about. So first principles. So having enjoyed the extended mind and knowing that she's coming to our symposium and going to be very involved, already had a Zoom chat with her, she's wonderful. That's really the key thing, because when you towards the end of the extended mind, which you haven't read, you must, she talks about the human brain superpower is other human brains. That's why it was developed, to deal with other humans. So much of it comes down to, I mean, like, Monday was a really tough day for me. I admit that. I told you guys it's fine. And after that, I've had a great upward trajectory, largely because of you guys. I'm very, very grateful. These 2 hours are phenomenal because, different things will go into our heads, even if we may ignore them for a moment, right? So when we're talking about first principles, that doesn't mean only interacting with the text. It also means that how can the text help us interact with the author? Right? That can mean as simple as having a telephone directory associated with it, or it can mean many other things. But that's the whole thing. We're dealing with such huge problems in the world at the moment. I don't want text to just be a copy of what it was 500 years ago, obviously. But equally, we don't think it's just going to be have a meeting with someone and talk to them and you're done. So that's why I'm so excited by the potential of VR, where literally, it can be anything, but it can only be as far as our imagination will take us. And that's why we really have to push that side of things now. Sorry, that was one of my screeds.
Well, one thought, Freud, that listen, because and having been lucky to be sat somewhat closer than some to some of the genesis of bits of author, which is always interesting too. And there are so many really interesting and powerful things built into it. But I'm also conscious when I tinker around with it, I'm sort of thinking, wait a minute. So even though I know these things are in there, I'm thinking, well, this isn't what I'm used to doing. So an interesting analysis, and maybe you can find someone maybe lurking at Southampton who wants a task, but actually is to try and figure out how far from the norm, which I guess is someone who's skilled in Microsoft Office, this writing tool is. Because one of the challenges of uptake is there will be subtleties. Any tool, good tool, shapes us slightly in the way we use it. So I sort of see a challenge here is the adoption, where people say, hey, this is really cool, I really like it, and they won't use it. Because actually there's a bit too much. Well, no, I want to not use terms that are divisions, but I'm just conscious that the deeper the tool is, the more you need to sort of dig in and commit to learning to it. So part of the question is, how different is this to probably what School Leaver, for sake of example, has? I mean, we're atypical in this room because we're a long way down the use of tools path. But how different is it to the way they think about structuring a document, which might help us find ways. So where are the low-hanging fruit to get people from the rut they're in to seeing the actual demonstrable advantages of using what they've seen? So you can show them, oh, that's really cool. And then you go and ask a week later, are they using it? No, they're not, because they know how to use this thing, and this thing is scary and requires learning. So I don't know what the answer is there, but part of it might be just to see, where these things map across to give you the best on path, because I sense, sadly, that often we look at something, think it's really interesting, but we just don't follow through because it's not immediate enough. And I reflect in that, part of my deliberate stuff is if I know, admittedly, infrequently put something in the journal, or when I'm doing stuff for, helping you with editing the journal stuff, I'm spending a lot more time in author. And at the moment, there's definitely an onboarding each time I go into a long session. And by the end of it, I'm just about getting comfortable with it. But then if I don't do it again for 2 weeks, I'm pretty much starting from scratch again. And that's the problem I allude to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one of the promises of VR. You can more grasp something. I think that is just
Second.
hugely important, not having to learn lots of little clickety things. I think someone else was talking when I talked. Who was that? Sorry.
Just that was me. I was seconding what Mark said. I think it's one of the vastly misunderstood or under realized situations we're in the last couple decades, and it's getting to a I think it's leading to a lot of frustration that people can't quite put their finger on. The distributed nature of tech when it becomes logistics is the same thing as relearning a UI. You go in with an intention and you have sort of promises in your head, and either whether the UI could be working perfectly, but if you can't figure out what to do, then that's a broken promise.
Yeah, I mean,
Anyway,
so some of it obviously comes down to what you can do. Like the amount of effort people put into Photoshop and Final Cut and so on is absolutely tremendous, but it does give them a demonstrable skill. And that's something that's very difficult to demonstrate when you end up with a little text document. But these discussions I'm really grateful for, because moving forward into what we're hopefully going to inspire for VR will be so completely central. You know, it's
Yeah. So the way that I would talk about author and what I've seen so far is to go back to, software is bureaucracy sped up, which is not an insult to either a software or bureaucracy. But it's just to say that it's formalism. And formalism has to capture a particular point of view about a thing. It's put differently, like bureaucracy is there to make you do something. It's there because it has opinions about what things matter and what you want to do. I would be curious about how author tells you what it wants you to do with it and where to go next. And this is sort of the stepping back question from the where are the buttons to do the things, and so it's more, what are the ways that author supports or encourages you to follow the things that it's best at with its functionality, because without the progenitor of author demonstrating where those bits and pieces are, it can be a challenge for people to see how an experience is enhanced by it. And so, I mean, that's not clippy, but it's just like, what are the furnishings and the features that tell people about that?
Yeah, that's really hard. And one of the whole points of the future of text is to help people like me. We need to have competition, and it's very, very hard to have competition when people think there's Word, Scrivener, and a few other things and pages, and that is it. That's all we need, to increase the curiosity. First of all, are you swimming, Echo? Okay, no, I think he's.
But I can sort of also echo this. Since one of the things I'm struggling with at the moment in terms of trying to help with Bob's murals and things is that really what I need to do is, be expert at Adobe Illustrator. I don't have it. I can install it, but installing it gets me nowhere. And the problem is, it's not just installing it. What I actually need to be is both a skilled Illustrator user and someone who doesn't just knock out books. So you need someone who's building digital content, and I don't mean posters for the side of buses. I actually mean digital content that's reused in multiple ways, that has embedded text and links and stuff. And where those people are, I don't know, but that's someone we really need to talk to, because there won't be many of them. So trying to work out if a tool can do any of the things we want is actually not even possible by reading the manual.
Yeah, on that note, sort of executionally, I know Illustrator about it as well as anyone.
Well, when I'll let when we come back to my little agenda flag later, when we've done this, I'd be interested, because that's really what I wanted to ask you guys later. But I don't want to hijack the conversation at this point. So
yeah, no, just as just to make you aware.
And earlier I was asking who here wants to present to the future of text. Brandel, you said yes. Alan, would you like?
I don't think I can. I don't. I'm sorry if if it sounded like I said yes. I don't want to have that conversation with my manager yet.
No, that's absolutely fine. I asked Bruce Horn, and he said exactly that. So we're grateful. I'm grateful that you're here. But that's absolutely not a problem, for crying out loud. I absolutely see where you are.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, and I think that I would be within my rights to be able to participate in discussions. But I don't think I don't think at this point, with my new role and my new team and my new org, that I should be going off and actually capital P presenting.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfectly fine. And your input here certainly is part of the shaping of what this is anyway. What I will be sending out quite soon, I just got 2 more while we were talking accepts. What I'll be sending out is a request to everyone, whether you're a speaker or not, to send at least a week before an abstract or paragraph about what you will be talking about or what you expect to get out of it. So that may be something, you can frame your things, that'll be shared. Then we of course have the transcript of the day, but then we are within a month afterwards, anybody can submit comments, like a second part of what they have about what they've learned. And that may make it a more dynamic process. So maybe, Brandel, you will feel like pretending to be an audience member in this context and be very general, but whatever you feel, really. Alan, will you want to present?
Yes, ideally I would like to. I have to figure out, for me, it's not so much a problem of permissions with work, it's just the nature of the work obliterates other obligations. But I'll have a lighter week this week, and so I will look at the email you sent and look at that time. It's possible that I will be on vacation, and if that's the case, it's far more likely I'll be able to present.
Very good. I just confirmed to people, I'm going to put the link in here. I'm wondering if there's anyone else you guys want us to invite. Please have a look at the link. There's some really interesting people. Constructive Labs, have you heard of them? They're building their whole, like a whole copy link. I'm doing a link here as well.
Oh, well, a little VR, little gem while people are reading the list that I came across just watching the Noda list was someone said, is there a way to turn off the movement or the location detection while I'm working? And there was sort of confused conversation. It came out and said, well, I'm trying to work in my room, but I'm on the train. You can see where this is going. All these things that you never thought when you started out designing something. So that was an interesting one. I'm not sure if they quite solved it yet.
That's something
you want your room. You want to move relative to your room, but you want the room to move relative to the world around it, which is an interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a problem that will have to be resolved at the hardware level, based on being able to take cues from the tracking of the environment. But as far as I'm aware, it's something that people are thinking about for trains and planes and various things like that.
Yeah, because you don't want your desk to be 2 stops behind.
Yeah, that is very, very interesting. I think it's one of the key interesting things. You want to be able to map out a room at home, in your home office, and your normal office if you have one, maybe at the club, maybe at a train, maybe at a plane, like Fabian was doing. And you want to kind of designate spaces for things. You could say, on my right, I always want to have pictures or reference, whatever it might be. So when you go from place to place, you can still like tabs through is like, okay, I'm working on writing a book. Doesn't matter where I am physically. I want the same kind of stuff to follow me. But then I also want to snap my finger and now I'm reading something. It's going to be absolutely amazing to see how these things are dealt with. And also a bit worrying about, you know, the infrastructures. Will Apple own the whole thing? Will Meta own the whole thing? Will there be, you know, Mac versus Windows issues? Or, yeah, that's what I mean when I keep banging on about infrastructure, of course.
The issue at the heart of it is the way that where's my quest? But you know, headsets, they use something called visual inertial odometry, which is where you fuse the visual picture of how object features, corners, and bright spots change from frame to frame with the data that's coming from the accelerometers. You know, one solution might be to have kind of a fixed point of an accelerometer or two in an environment that you can use as the zero ground truth. So it might be the case that, you know, if you're in a train, that you actually stick down an accelerometer to a train table such that, you know, you can say that's zero, so that people can move it around. But it's a very hard problem to do from just something that's on your head in that place, because normally when you're moving in relation to a fixed environment, and if you have to account for the small or big movements that an environment is undertaking, then a lot of the assumptions that you're able to make about how that means that the head is moving are flawed, which you know, deteriorates the quality of the tracking at best, and completely ruins the ability to make any reconciliation between the visual scene and the inertial information entirely. So yeah, fun problem, lots of people working on it. I don't know where their solutions are yet.
I just have one more visual idea for Freud's sort of virtual office, which is you have a memory hole that's like a swirling black hole, and you put things near to it, and if you leave them there, eventually they get sucked into the memory hole and never come back.
That's not a bad idea. That's like
like a disposal event horizon, but up till that point, you can claw them back.
It's like fax paper. My father loved using fax paper because it got yellow, so he would know which documents on the desks were old.
Well, in fact, that metaphor is used inside Tinderbox. It has a little dog ear on Notes, and the icons actually yellow. They start out a duck egg blue, and over a short period of time, they're yellow. And that was the deliberate nod to that same thing. You know, the paper gets older, so the slightly brighter notes, you know, the little icons. For those that see it and use it, yeah, you can tell the ones you just edited, because so yeah, these ideas are around. Can I quickly, before we sort of, you know, lest we dive into something else, can I just quickly raise the question I had earlier, which is, while people are here, you recall the last meeting I mentioned I'd done some work with Bob's murals, and, you know, trying to get them to work, and I've done a lot more thinking since, and I keep going around the spiral of, on a simplistic level, it's just image maps, except that I know, for instance, that for bitmaps, HTML5 still has a notion of image map and image map code, but you don't see many of them in the wild. So, and plus the fact that in reality, the stuff that Bob's doing is probably going to be vector information. So in that case, you need an SVG or similar map. And the question is whether that's a sidecar to the file, or whether you can put it inside. I know PDF is a wrapper, but you need a PDF tool capable. And so so that's one part of the problem. And the other is, alluding to the Illustrator thing, as I read up about it, I think the only vector editing app that says it's capable of basically making a manifest of points of interest in a document and saving it as a layer is Illustrator. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's done, because the other thing is you probably want a layer that's got effectively click targets with the text in them that might not necessarily be the text that's in the on-screen thing, because there might not be enough space for the whole thing. And it probably wants an ID, because in reality, it's probably linking down to another manifest of the text elsewhere. And I sort of haven't got further than that, and I don't want to waste a lot of time just fiddling around in Illustrator. I mean, I think I probably bottomed this out, and the answer is that generally we don't. Our tools don't do this at the moment. And I'm also conscious of the fact of the tail wagging the dog, and Fred's comment well made the other day about, well, I should be allowed to design how I want to see things. So there is a tension between having something that says all these things, the point when you're designing something, say all these bits of text need to go in this picture, and storing them in a way that gets to the end of the creative process. And then at the end of the creative process can float up to be this layer, whether it's part of the document or exported elsewhere, that becomes effectively the image map, which becomes the glue for the VR cleverness that allows you to just, fold a mural or click on it or something, but still interact out for it. And I just wondered what people's sort of thought was on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have my hand up, so I'm going to scream a bit here. Why not just make an image map and store it in Visual Meadow? I'm not exactly sure how to do that, but maybe we can hack something through Illustrator.
Well, there's the rub, but I'm trying not. What I was trying to do was not get to the point where, without giving it a wider consideration, I just tried to hack a thing. I mean, I've got to the point where I know that to make an SVG thing, I wasted 2 days trying to make an SVG map of one of Bob's murals, because actually it's something that's remarkably difficult for someone who's not an expert to do, is to take a vector diagram and just say, no, I don't want those 4,000 layers. What I actually want is a circle the size of that thing there. Please make an SVG thing. Hard to do. So I don't. The problem is not the metadata as such. The problem is the tools and how the interaction occurs. So you know what you want out of it, but how do you stream that into your creative tool, whether it's something like a PDF generator that's got.
So a specific question on that. When you say interaction, do you mean how the end user will view it, or are you talking about how the creator will assign what things are, or do you mean that
no, it's not how the creator views it. So the starting point of this was that somebody, I think it was Brendel, took Bob's mural and we put it essentially on a wall in VR, which was fine. But we then realized that although we could sort of smush up things, we couldn't really interact with this because we didn't know what was in it. We could see it, but we couldn't interact with it. So the question I took away was, how do you do that? Now, I managed to extract all the text, but I realized that's still stuff we'll use because I don't know I had no way of mapping it to the underlying system, which caused me to step back and say, right, so let's stop fiddling with the text at this point. Let's look at the problem of mapping how and when and where we map that label to something that's usable in VR. So it might have to go through several bits, and I don't claim to know the answer. And I'm at this stage not trying to design a particular thing because I don't want the tail to wag the dog. I'm trying to work out where the pain points are. So for instance, if you make it very sort of text and data centric, that's going to be painful for the designer who now is told that you can only color inside these lines, when you're making the stuff. They won't like that. But if it's entire afterthought, then you won't get a clean export.
I'm going to stop talking now, but I do want to highlight, I think this is super incredibly important, because a lot of stuff will in normal life be flat. How we assign values to different parts of it will be absolutely amazing. So please, please, please come with brilliant ideas. We are recording as always.
So I can talk a little bit about what I've done in my professional career to build things, because I build like games and other things that are sort of like games but not as fun. And over the years, that necessitates building editors of various kinds, and editors are, like author, they're formalisms for supporting certain tasks. And one of the tricks that I found fairly early on, and I found very, very rarely are there exceptions to it, is that my favorite editors for many things are actually the ones that other people use, so that I don't have to write them. And so, for example, for a pinball game, I came up with a way for people to use Adobe Illustrator for it. And in pinball, you have a physics simulation, which is essential, and the pertinent details are what are called the friction and the restitution of all of the different surfaces, their masses and densities, things like that, in order to figure out how a ball's going to bounce against those things and what's going to impart extra velocity, that kind of stuff. I used a special layer naming system, and then I used certain colors and color channels to represent the coefficients of friction and restitution, and told my artists and editors, use this color to mean this material, this color to mean this material. If you're interested in going deeper, then use these channels of information to configure in a custom way these physical attributes. I made another game. I don't know if I've shown you a link to it, but I think it's hilarious, and I understand why they didn't want it, but it was this Marionette Puppeteer game, again with sort of a physics simulation, but in this one you had the ability to create joints and linkages so that you controlled with a leap motion, sort of finger tracking, marionettes that had to do jobs like pour champagne or brush their teeth, or dance with a tambourine and a microphone at a karaoke night. Serious stuff. And in order to do that, I told people that they needed to name the layers according to their points of connection, and so that their pivots were attached here and here. And so you would say, so you have an object called arm, and then you'd have an object here that said like arm forearm pivot or arm forearm pin, and by virtue of those names were we able to then assemble those things automatically. I didn't have to do any of the programming that you would ordinarily need to do for that, and just the establishment of a nomenclature and a naming convention for it was adequate for those things. In that same way, I've done things for Apple in terms of representing the thermal flow lines through products by having SVG pads, making sure that they were named correctly so that you had all of the interpolants that would be valid for like the top line of all of the air that goes through the Mac Pro versus the middle versus the bottom. And then making sure that they were not just looking correctly, because sometimes people would be like, well, I want the line to go like this. And so they would have a line and then a circle and then a line. And I said, no, it has to be one path. So
as a practical thing,
yes.
Could you, can you with your Illustrator document, if someone was to send you a document that was effectively a spreadsheet of ID number, text, can you import that and make that a sort of, as it were, a layer or a resource inside the document that such that information might end up as a box, or it might end up as an arrow, but it would have an identity to it, and it might have some supporting text? Because I think that this is the glue bit, and whether it happens in Illustrator or another app, I think what I sense is part of the problem. It's a bit like I recall using the Adobe Creative Suite. Well, it wasn't called that then, when the web arrived, and it was trying to get its head around. Do you remember Image Ready? I don't know those who did, which was a special tool, the sort of add-on to Photoshop to allow you to make image maps, because it was bloody difficult using Photoshop at that time, and things moved on. But I sense is that disconnect, and part of the problem is there are lots of things you can do, and you can see the parts, but there probably aren't that many people who are working regularly crossing that boundary enough to realize, oh right, this actually needs to become, in a sense, a usable feature to more than very, very skilled niche practitioners.
Right, yeah. So Illustrator is mostly in the hands of people who aren't concerned with the semantic consequences of the structure, beyond what it may mean for the house style of people knowing how many clicks to get through to this piece or that piece and that kind of thing. But it is possible to wield it with the semantics as the first goal. And so it's possible to not just name things according to IDs, but also according to IDs that possess themselves hierarchies that help to locate specific pieces of information. So they're not just spatially, sort of geospatially kind of coordinated to mean like, this text is over the region, which is the button. You can make it so that those parental relationships are themselves descriptive of those relationships. And you can also add renderable or non-renderable objects inside or around those semantic structures, as well as the spatial ones that are indicative of those relationships. So depending on what kinds of features and capabilities you want to have demonstrated within an application, by far and away, my most preferred way of working is to think about the things that I need to have represented, think about the ways that I can layer them into a document or some set of assets in the WYSIWYG tools that that people are expected to use, and then guarantee and verify that I can extract them on the other end with whatever data-driven systems that we have. So, you know, makes it sound pretty boring when you lay it out like that. I was telling an intern about creativity yesterday, but that's what I did with Author when we were playing with it. Is like, take a look at those things, see how you make them, see how you read them, and then pretend like you've done something creative.
But it's really interesting. But Bob's point about the arrows and things is really interesting, because I can imagine someone saying, here you go, here's all the text, job done. They say, well, no, wait a minute, I've got to add all these other bits, and they need to have a semantic meaning. But I'm not a semantic person. I just draw pictures. I just draw arrows or something. So there's quite a challenge there. And what I'm trying to think about is maybe a way to do something useful with this is to sort of, in a sense, design the feature set that whether you build it into Illustrator or one of the looky-likeys, Zara, or I forget the names, Affinity Design or whatever, or you just build it as a little SVG type tracer. It might be that what you want to do is, no, what I need to do is I need to take this document, because I think one bit a lot of people forget is this fact that if it's vector, where the sort of base size is, because at some point you've got to have a tie between the overlay, even if it's a layer in the document, and the document underneath, which is one thing I see consistently getting missed when I see people writing about this. They all concept, that's somebody else's job that they park to one side. And I'm thinking, well, because if you don't get that right, well, it's a bit like your virtual room being 2 stops behind on the train. You're lost.
Let me just ask the question to both of you then. Could we use image maps?
Well, these are what we're discussing are image maps, but they're that's in a sense not the complex part of the question. And I don't mean to make that sound trivial. And the good thing is, in a sense, so we have a notion in image maps, and we have image maps that we can do in SVG as well as in a sort of bitmap format. The question is how and where you insert them in a process, because quite rightly, you don't want someone who's, to say, a creative who has to make something being given something like, say, one of Marc Antoine's, very, very formalized data systems. Here, stick this into your blank canvas and get going, because that will not end well. And plus the fact that for our legacy materials, we probably need a sort of a definition of a tracing thing that both defines what you need to do and gives some suggestion as to the metadata affordances that the process has to emit. Because if it creates information that's no use to us when we get into the VR, all is for naught, or it is until we redesign it to put in the information we need to put in the first place.
Hang on, making image maps in Illustrator, I don't think it's that difficult. And if we take the, we can embed it in different ways, that's fine, but why not put one of them in Visual Meta? If you have a mural.
Well, that's fine, but forgive me, and I absolutely, that's a really good idea. But the bit that I would argue with the bit saying it's slightly easy to make an image map. I mean, I know what it is, and I've made image maps. I mean, in the past, certainly I did them lots in the 90s, but I'm conscious that actually it isn't quite that simple. And it was really brought home to me when I've got some of Bob's murals as PDFs, and I've got some as JPEGs. And making something useful out of them is remarkably hard, and it should be. So I can use something like Text Sniper. I got, that massive mural he did, the Forward Vision one, got all the text out of that using Text Sniper, which was fabulous. Of course, it's got me nowhere because I now have a load of text, but I can't actually.
But to be specific, because we are running out of time. So if we had a process where we could take a mural or any kind of an image, and somehow assign this coordinate equals this, like I put in the chat based on the link that Peter gave us, using Illustrator or whatever. If we have a section in Visual Meta that allows for this, it would say something like, on page so-and-so, there is an image, here are the coordinates, which if we then added one variable, which is this area is so-and-so, right? Because it was very interesting what Brandel said about all kinds of games. We could imagine that this area is high friction. Like, let's imagine it's a mural that you can also touch. but then it also has text on it, and then it also has lightness on it. So you can have the same coordinates many, many times, but you assign different values that do different things.
Absolutely. So it's more than an image map. This is the subtlety. The image map says that this bit of the picture is this clickable area is its normal intent. What we're talking about is something more subtle. We're talking about basically an image metadata map.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's where the fun begins. But to a certain extent, once you've done that and got it reasonably solid, then putting into visual meta or doing stuff with it, because at that point, if it's got the link, the basic thing is just to say this bit here, when you click this, gets you this text and it's anchored, then I can see work in VR, you can start to do stuff. Having extra information is exactly where my mind's going. But I'm very conscious that someone who's maybe laying out a large poster is not interested in what that box does or what that arrow does. They're just making an arrow because they need to tell the visual story. Somebody else likely would, and that's part of the challenge, because we need to understand that two people with completely different interests and aims have got to traverse the same body of information.
Right.
That's normally where these things go wrong.
The act of assigning this will be a separate job from all kinds of other jobs. It'll be a separate task. So how about if we try to design at least a spec to help us better understand a thing has been created, and now you do the boxes and you assign. It can't be that hard to build the interface. You know, this circle, this rectangle, this shape, whatever, has these values. And then put that into a basic visual map code. And then we start experimenting with how that can be useful in VR. I think this is very, very, very important. Chris Gutteridge, who should be on these calls, he was the one who said many years ago at the very beginning of Visual Meta, he said, we could then take a chart and encode the values in there. So each bar means this, and it's in Visual Meta. So it's not just a pixel or a vector or whatever. Visual Meta says what it is. So I think what Mark is talking about here can be used for so many things. I was in Germany a few years ago at the very beginning of this, where some German professor had a passion for downed World War II German aircrafts. And he wanted to assign metadata. And we came up with a simple thing of why not just use image maps? So if you have a pilot standing in front of it, you draw a box around the pilot. And if you know the name of the pilot, you put that, but you also put down pilot. You know, maybe the sky, you put the year and you put the weather. So the idea there was you should be able to navigate thousands of these images without ever seeing any text. You could just click on the engine and it would show you all the pictures that have that engine and so on. So this, Mark, that you're highlighting, to have it in a stable text format and then explode it in VR would be amazing. Absolutely worth looking at.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for that. I just want to make sure I hadn't been sort of, going down the wrong rabbit hole. I think the challenge really is to make the SVG, the image mapping part meld with existing creative process. I mean, there's as you rightly say, having something that deals with legacy data. But I think the hard part at the moment is more for vector data than bitmaps, because with bitmaps you've got a grid already, so a lot of the problem is lessened. But I can also see the kind of thing, again, thinking like Bob's large mural. What you want is someone says, okay, go and detect all the rectangles, and then let me go through and tell you the ones that aren't relevant, because of course he has a lot of hardware shaped like arrows in there, which will be, if it's good AI, will detect them. And I also noticed in recovering the text that the more you mix text and art, the more difficult it is certainly to abstract out. And one other interesting thing I took from that was working out who decides whether if anyone decides whether text that is in what is broadly a picture is text in the text layer that you're dealing with, the text of the object, or it isn't, or maybe it doesn't matter. You detect all the text, but I suspect that's the low ball answer and just causes you a problem down the line, because you need to understand that the stuff you've got out that's hiding there in metadata, unseen by a human brain, is actually what you want. So when you start doing stuff with it, you don't end up with all sorts of odd outcomes.
I think that's melting with the things like live text. And I'm going to ask Fabian to say what is written here. But before I do that, I just wanted to say this goes to the heart of what I wrote in this introduction of thinking from first principles. I think we have to do, I don't know if it was Einstein or some other famous clever person who said, don't complain about the system, make a new system. I think we're at a point now where we have to ignore a lot of people. And if we manage to, together in dialogue, help inspire something along these lines where, what is the effing point here? The point of the author is communicate this to be done through these different media. What does that mean? You know, we have to go that far back. Let's not argue over typography and basic stuff. You know, people are doing that. So in this case of, I have an image and I want the system to understand this. And I think there is a hunger for this. Like people upload pictures to Instagram and to Facebook and all these places, and they do things with them. They do add metadata. So if a system like this could be made pleasurable to use, you know, highlighting it this, highlighting it that, massaging it, playing with it, like you're in Photoshop or Final Cut, but it's more direct to use, could have an amazing impact. And Fabienne, you were in text saying, maybe there are some tools that can help analyze the image to do some of the pre-tagging. So an editor could then come and click, yes, these faces are so-and-so, and these things are so-and-so. That would be amazing. Could you highlight that, please?
Yeah, sure. There's the big program for the 10 years in UV has been a nice object, so we do it better and faster. So we can use that. So we can find in an image, get a couple of layers, or even cut through the image, and then each of the detected object becomes its dedicated layer. That being said, that's far from perfect. So if the actual author of the document were to does it quote unquote from the beginning, as Brendel gave in his example with some kind of convention, definitely the most efficient way. But let's say as a backup solution, that might be interesting to try.
Yeah, I just looking in Illustrator now, it actually has a panel still for SVG interactivity, which is pretty cool. So Illustrator is very well attuned nowadays to exporting as SVG. And it means that you can also add specific pieces of code related to actions in those objects at that point as well. So that probably includes having the ability to, for example, toggle the visibility of layers, which also means that you have the ability to use layers as unrenderable information for this specific sort of capabilities of it. So yeah, I'd love to get the AI of one of did Bob send an AI of one of his murals through to everybody, or
you mean
PDF will have some stuff, but edit. Sorry,
you mean .ai, .illustrator file, rather than artificial intelligence version of his mural, right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to look through a .ai, see what's sort of doable out of the box, and how we might be able to kind of refine or modify those things. Like I said, I as modest as I am about my skills in general, I am very, very confident it runs about Illustrator. So if anybody wants to do basically anything in it, then I will find a way.
Mark,
yeah, so we could take a look through that.
Mark, do you have a native Illustrator file from Bob of the mural?
No, I don't. I've only got PDFs and JPEGs. I'm sure he probably has them. The thing was, I didn't want to prod Bob about this until I had a something sensible to do with it, because the danger is it starts a ball rolling, because I know we've discussed doing more with his maps, and I think we can. But I think what I've mainly been working on is the fact of just how many missing parts there are at the moment to get from where we are to where we want to be. But I can certainly ask him if he's got that. I mean, he said, if there's more stuff you want. But so it sounds as though we are at the point where an AI thing, it doesn't really matter if it's the most up-to-date one. We just want an image. We can say, okay, this is our reference playpen. Okay, yeah, sure.
So in closing then, at least from my side, I really want it in Visual Meta 2, even if that is purely normal image map, and it's in a bit in Visual Meta that just says image map for, page so-and-so. It could even be page 0 if that's all it is, or page 1 rather, but it has to be a page. The reason I say it, Brandel, is the obvious thing, and you highlighted it in what you just said. You said SVG actions still supported. you know, there is always the danger of anything embedded will stop being supported. So let's keep it on the surface level, right? At least one version of it.
Yeah, it's not so much that SVG actions will go away in terms of things that are as SVGs, but Illustrator may change its mind about whether to support them. So I think one can be fairly confident that if something is retained as an SVG, then you'll be able to have those things. It's just whether that tool will be up to the task of being able to manipulate those kinds of things in future. So, but I take your point.
Okay, wonderful.
Visual Matter already, you know, in concept allows us to put other things in there. So just putting the SVG in rather than trying to turn it into JSON or something. I just looked up, apparently you can, but I reckon the more times you mung this into something else just for the sake of an apparent convenience is probably, that's Mother Nature telling you you're being a bit too smart by half.
Yeah. And on that note, thank you very much for today, guys. I look forward to Monday. And Brandel, you're flying over for the symposium, right? That's all confirmed?
That's my plan. Yes, I haven't booked a ticket yet, but I will have to do that, and then I'll have to seek guidance on how to be in places like London, because I've never been there before. So yeah, it's gonna be exciting.
It'll be looking very brown.
Yeah, very brown. I'll obviously help you with what I can. It's wonderful, and the Apple campus in Battersea looks fantastic. And Fabian, you are coming over here too. If well, Mark, I expect you will come up as well. Okay, yeah, wonderful. If you have any further
Great weekend
symposium or people, please email or put it on that spreadsheet. And yeah, have a very good weekend all. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.